This is something that actually really happened. It wasn't made up. It wasn't something that somebody just put together. This is a true story relating to what Mark wrote down in concern to what Jesus did in this particular time and place. Now, if you remember, we started off last time we had Jesus crossing the lake, the Sea of Galilee, and they run into this storm, and the storm gets really bad. The disciples are terrified. They're even more terrified after Jesus calms the storm. So now we're getting to the point to where they now arrive at the other side. Now, the other side of the Sea of Galilee is Gentile territory. This is not Jewish territory. This is Gentile territory. The inhabitants of that area were basically Romans and Syrians, if I've learned this correctly. If it's not, it doesn't really matter. They're Gentiles. And we'll know that as we go along. Just very clearly are. So they get across, and then as Jesus is getting out of the boat, he encounters this man who is really carrying on something fierce. He is naked. He lives in the cemetery, and many times people have tried to tie him up and chain him, and he just breaks it away. He comes over by where Jesus is. He bows down to Jesus and says, "What do you have to do with us, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" That's quite amazing, right? The demon bows down. The demon calls him by who he is. Well, Jesus replies to the demon and says, "What's your name?" Jesus had been telling him to come out, but the demon resisting and fighting. And he says, "Legion." Well, legion is a large number, okay? It varies where you look at how big it is, but it's a large number. We're going to find out that it was a large number as we go along. So it says legion, and then the demon says, don't send us out, don't do this to us before our time. They know that they're heading to the abyss. They know that's where they're going to end up. They don't, not like us, they don't have hope. And they said, "Let us go into the pigs," because there was a large herd of pigs, a very large herd of pigs, about 2,000 of them. So Jesus says to him, "Go ahead, go into the pigs." Well, when they do that, the pigs go hog wild, if you pardon the pun, and say, "Well, we don't like this." And the pigs, what they do is they run down this steep embankment, go right down into the Sea of Galilee, and drown. Pigs can swim, but only so long. But they literally killed themselves. So now the herdsmen are getting a little bit upset about this because, of course, they just lost 2,000 pigs. And they go into town and they tell the people, they around the countryside, they tell people all these things that are taking place. And once they do that, the people start coming back and they see and they find out and they hear this whole story of what has happened. That news travels really fast. And the people from the area say, "Jesus, we want you to leave. We don't want you here." So Jesus does. But now the guy who was possessed by the demons that had been cast out, he's fully clothed, he's in his right mind, and he says to Jesus, "I want to go with you." And Jesus says, "No." Interesting. So he says, "You stay here." Well, through this, and then as we look at it a little bit further, we're going to come up with what I have at the end is what I call the 7 whys. See, because as we're learning this, things kind of jump out at us and say, why? Why? And I found 7 of them. Maybe there's more. Maybe some of them you don't really have a question why, but we're going to look at it here in a little bit. But first we're going to do is we're going to go through this verse by verse to now that we have the big picture, now let's look at the foundational picture, and then we're going to look at the whys and the teaching. Verse 1. They came to the other side of the sea, onto the country of the Garcians, and that's Gentiles' territory. And verse 2, when he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. And he had dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain. Now it's interesting, in the Gospel of Matthew, he speaks of 2 demon-possessed. And in Luke and in Mark, it's 1. It's not a contradiction. Because if you stop and think, wherever there are 2, there is 1. Is it? There's 1. And then there's another one, which makes 2, but there is 1. Okay? For some reason, the second one really isn't mentioned in all 3 of them, as far as anything about them. We don't know why. Apparently, we don't need to know why. But it's not a contradiction. Verse 4 and 5. Because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Consequently, night and day he was screaming among the tombs and the mountains, and he gashed himself with stones. You can picture this in your mind. You can just see this really crazy guy, or crazy guys, you might say, out in the cemetery, up on the hillside, just carrying on and screaming and just being all kinds of obnoxious and being wild and picking up stones and even beating himself and cutting himself. He's doing all these things. If it was portrayed on a TV show or a movie, you would have this really ugly looking guy really coming down with all sorts of facial features that would scare the daylights out of you. And this is what we have here. A demon-possessed guy with a lot of demons. Verse 6 and 7, seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him. And shouting with a loud voice, he said, what business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me. See, because Jesus had told him to come out. The demons did not want to come out. And we're going to see a little bit about that here in a minute. But there's also something here that we find interesting. See, the demons have faith. See, they believed who Jesus was, but they didn't have saving faith. Right? They believe in a future judgment that's going to come, and they're going to be sent to a place of torment. They know that. They also believe in prayer. That was the one I found a little fascinating. Because if you remember, they implored Jesus. Basically, that means they prayed to Jesus to not send them out. They begged him. Verses 8 through 10. For he had been saying to them, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And he was asking him, what is your name? And he said to him, my name is Legion, for we are many. And he began to implore him earnestly not to send them out into the country. Jesus had been telling the demon to come out. He was saying that to him. He wasn't requesting, he was telling. And he also says, what's your name? And the demons answer back, Legion. But they began to implore him, beg him earnestly, don't send us out into the countryside, into nothingness. Verses 11 and 12. Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountains, and the demons implored him, saying, send us into the swine so that we may enter them. Here again, they're pleading, they're imploring. They say, don't send us just out into nothingness. Let us go into the pigs. Verse 13, and Jesus gave them permission. And coming out, the unclean spirit entered the swine, and the herd rushed down a steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. Here then, Legion goes into the 2,000 pigs. So we know there was more than 2,000 demons because they possessed all of them that were inside this one man. Verses 14 and 15. The herdsmen ran away and reported in the city and the country, and the people came to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon-possessed, sitting down, clothed, and in his right mind. The very man who had the legion, and they became frightened. If you remember, if you go back a little bit, we remember the fact that when the disciples were on the boat and the storm is brewing, they were afraid. But when Jesus calmed the storm, they were more terrified. We have the same thing here. The people are terrified because they are seeing the power that Jesus has. As this man who had all these demons is now sitting in his right mind, they become frightened. Verses 16 through 19. Then those who had seen it described to them how it had happened, and the demon-possessed man, and all about the swine. And they began to implore him to leave their region. And as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been the demon-possessed was imploring him, that's Jesus, that he might accompany him. And he did not let him, but he said to him, "Go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he has mercy on you." There's another one of those interesting little facts. The man implores Jesus, "Let me come with you." And Jesus says no. Another one of our whys. Verse 20. And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis the great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed. And you would be amazed. I mean, you've just seen this miraculous thing take place. Not only was Jesus showing his power over the storm, over creation, over nature, he was now displaying his great power over the underworld, the demonic world. He was showing that he had power over them. Now the 7 whys. Why did Jesus cross the Sea of Galilee? And this is not the same question as why did the chicken cross the road? Okay, this is slightly different. It becomes obvious that Jesus crossed because there was someone on the other side that needed him. I look back as similar to Jesus' parable of the lost sheep. If you remember in that parable, Jesus said the shepherd left the 99 and went out looking for the one that was lost. Jesus left the crowds of Jews and came across to the Gentile territory because there was one that was lost. There was one that was bound. There was one that was his. And he came to free him. Why did the naked man, why was the man naked and bound with chains? I think there's great symbolism here. When you really look at it, you say, he was naked and bound in chains. He is very much the symbol of where we stand without Christ. We have nothing to offer. We're totally exposed to all of the sin nature in this world and in our own lives. We're totally open to all of the lies of the devil. And all that happens is it brings us into bondage. We're tied up, you might say. We're caught in that bondage of sin. This is exactly what this man was, this demon-possessed man. He was tied in the bondage of the demons, the evil world. Next why. Why do the demons not want to be cast out but go into the pigs? And I just use a simple Bible verse for that one. In Matthew 12, verse 43, now when the unclean spirit goes out of a man, it passes through waterless places, seeking rest, and does not find it. Demons, when they do not have something to possess, are basically left to just wander. And they wander until they can find another home. See, in that Matthew passage, there's a lot more to it, but it's showing us they do not want to be left out there in the middle of nothing. They need to possess something. They need to be controlling something. And the demons want to control people, but demons cannot control people unless the people let them in. But many do without even realizing it. They don't even know they're doing it. But once they're in, they're so difficult to get rid of. And it takes the power of God to remove them. They wanted to go into the pigs instead of just into the nothingness. The next why. Why did Jesus allow the demons to go into the pigs? That's an interesting one, isn't it? Okay, we know that they didn't want to go into the nothingness, so they asked. No, they implored, if you remember, they implored him. Basically, they prayed to him. We do not want to be cast into nothingness. We don't want to be thrown out. Look over there. There's a whole bunch of pigs there. Let's go there. Let us go there. And I think to their surprise, Jesus said yes. But Jesus is, of course, a whole lot smarter. And he has a purpose for everything that's going on. It wasn't like he was caught off guard. Oh, yeah, I guess I'll just kind of let you go and do that. You know, I don't want to be too mean to you. No. Jesus was not doing them any favors by granting their request. Remember, they did not want to go into the nothingness. They wanted to go into the pigs. They go into the pigs. What do the pigs do? The pigs say, we don't want you in. You're too filthy for us. So they go and kill themselves because they can't deal with this filth that's in them. Pigs that can't stand that much filth. That's why they killed themselves. The next why. And then the thing that just really helps us to understand is when we see this miraculous thing taking place. The fear that it brought onto the herdsmen and to the people in the area. Because now they have seen casting out a demon is something that happened on occasion. It was rare, but there were times that it happened where even the religious leaders, you might say, who were true religious leaders, would cast out demons, because in the Old Testament it was explained. But to cast out over 2,000, this had never been done. They had never heard of such a thing. Now you have the demonstration of the power Jesus has. They heard about the calming of the sea. Now they have literally seen Jesus over the demons, casting them out. And to demonstrate that it wasn't just a demon being cast out if they went into the nothingness, they now physically could see that the demons were large number, because it's 2,000 pigs. So his power wasn't just being demonstrated that he could cast out demons. It was demonstrated that he could cast out a host of demons, a legion of demons. That's power. And it scared them. It scared them so much that they wanted Jesus to leave. And we say, why in the world? I mean, come on. It's like he just did this wonderful thing. Yeah, you lost some pigs. Okay, we understand that wasn't nice, but anyway, you've seen his power. Why do you want him to leave? Well, we can easily get caught up into the fear of the overwhelming things that God sometimes does. And we get afraid of his power when we truly see his power. When we're looking at the wonderful things he's done, but also some of the things that he does that scares us. Because it seems like it doesn't make sense. Just like Jesus giving permission to the demons to go into the pigs. When we first look at that and we see that and we say, that doesn't make any sense. Until we really start digging into it and see how it fits in the context. That Jesus was there for this man, but he had a purpose for this man. And that's our next why. Why did the people want Jesus to leave? Because of their fear. But also, why did Jesus not allow this man to go with him? That why helps us understand why Jesus did it the way he did it. See, because if you remember, in this man wanted to go with Jesus, Jesus said no, but Jesus didn't just say no. He said more. He said, no, but you go and tell the people, your people, the wonderful thing that God has done for you. In other words, he was become one of the early missionaries to the Gentiles. Gentile territory. Right? Now, I don't think he's the first one. I think if there's other things that we could look at, see, it doesn't matter. In this particular instance, Jesus said, you go and you tell. Tell of the wonderful things that God has done for you. The whole true story demonstrates how much loving kindness our God has for us. And for all his people, no matter where they are at. Because Jesus goes, Jesus will see to it that they are found. Jesus is constantly seeking. The Spirit of God is constantly seeking. And we are used many times as those that do the seeking. Those that are lost. Because none that are lost that are his will not be found. The joy that was in heaven with Jesus' parable about the lost sheep, because the one was found. And there's excitement and there's joy because the lost is found. It was the same with the coins. It was the same all the way down the line. In those parables, the finding of a lost one. In this, Jesus literally went and found the lost one. And then gave him a job. You go, you tell. Tell what? Tell what the wonderful things that God has done for you. Tell how Jesus came across the Sea of Galilee. How he calmed the storm. How he cast out the demons from you. The many demons. The thousands of them. There is true power in this man. You need to know about him. You need to learn more about him. But once we've seen his power, once we know it, once we understand it, like we did last week with the picture, we can't unsee it. So we don't need to be silent. We need to go out and proclaim. Because we have seen the mighty power of God at work. Every one of us can tell a story, a true story, in which God did a miraculous thing in our lives or in the lives of people we know. We've all seen it. And some of us have seen it many times. Some have seen it a few times. If we've seen it one time, nothing should hinder us from not wanting to go. See, Jesus was not going to allow him to come with him because that wasn't his calling. The calling of the demon-possessed man was to share it with his people, because he had just made a convert there. Because this man is really, really excited. This man is really, really relieved, because he's been relieved of something that he had no control over. And it took Jesus to break that control. The disciples, when they were sent out, then they were given the authority to cast out demons. And then they ran across some that they couldn't cast out. And Jesus said, these only come, with much prayer. So apparently in the demonic realm, there are different strengths in the demonic realm. But when you come to a legion of demons, only God can do this. But don't you find it fascinating that they come to him to begin with, and the first thing they do is they bow down to him and they proclaim who he is in no uncertain terms. They didn't say, you call yourself, or you think you are. They had no choice. They do not have the ability to deny the Son of God. And they had no ability to not bow down in front of him. See, even this, for the people, and for the man who was relieved of the demons, who was healed, this was another demonstration of the power of Jesus, to where he is in control. These demons could not do anything contrary to what Jesus allowed them. And the brilliance of Jesus to say, go ahead, go into the pigs. Because it showed, they could see. It wasn't no longer a case of, we heard about it. We saw it with our own eyes. We heard what Jesus said. We heard what the demons said. And now this man is sitting fully clothed. He's in his right mind. If that man lived today, he'd be in a straitjacket in some insane ward. Right? No, demons are real. They're around, okay? I think that there are parts of the world where they're far more than other places, but they are real. And I still say that demons do not come into a person unless the person allows it, knowingly or not knowingly. So since we know this good news, since we have seen the power of our God, we can sing the mighty power of God.